Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm finding this a very interesting hearing. It's really two hearings at once. One is on the question of should we leave Afghanistan, and if we shouldn't, what should be the nature of our troop commitment and our commitment to the country. The other is the withdrawal, which I thought was the subject of the hearing. The decision to leave Afghanistan was made by President Trump and his administration on February 29th, 2020, where we committed to leave by a date certain. There was a particular provision or a condition, if you will, about negotiations between the Taliban and the Afghan government. There was even a date specified, March 10th, 2020, less than 2 weeks after the signing of the Doha Agreement. Clearly, that condition was not met. My question is, and General Milley, you were the only one who overlapped the two administrations, were there any efforts on behalf of the prior administration to enforce that condition of negotiation with the Afghan government and the Taliban?
Senator, as I said in my opening remarks, the conditions that were required of the Taliban, none of them were met except one.
My question is, did we attempt to enforce those conditions? Did we inform the Taliban, for example, we won't advocate for the release of 5,000 prisoners unless you begin negotiations, or something similar?
I don't have personal knowledge of that, whether or not, Zal Khalilzad or others were personally saying that. I don't have personal knowledge of that, but I do know that none of the conditions were met except the one, which is don't attack American forces and coalition forces. That condition was.
The conditions were not met, but you testified that the troop withdrawals and
Correct.
the release of the 5,000 Taliban prisoners
Correct.
did proceed,
Correct.
even though the conditions had not been met. Is that correct?
That is correct.
And you've testified you provide your best military advice to President Biden that there should be a residual force left in Afghanistan. Did you provide the same advice to President Trump when they were negotiating the Doha Agreement?
Again, I'm not going to discuss precise advice.
Was it your best military judgment that a residual force
At that
should
time,
have been
yes,
left?
and that's what that, a series of memos and advice and meetings, et cetera, in the September-October timeframe, that's exactly what they were, and you can talk to Secretary Esper, he could tell you the same thing.
So your military judgment didn't change on January 20th?
No.
Thank you. General McKenzie, you touched on something that you were the only one to mention it in this entire hearing. In my judgment, one of the key moments was the fleeing of President Ghani, and that is, in fact, what really pulled the rug out from under the military and demoralized the entire government. That was really not the beginning of the end of the end. Do you have some thoughts on that?
I think when we consider what happened to the Afghan military, you have to consider it linked, completely linked to what happened to the Afghan government. And when your president flees literally on no notice in the middle of the day, that has a profoundly debilitating effect on everything else. Now, events were pretty far along on 15 August, so I would note that. But I do believe it is possible they could have fought and held parts of Kabul had the president stayed. I think that really demoralized those remnants of Afghans, and there were still considerable Afghan combat formations around Kabul on 15 August. I believe they were really disorganized by that and led to the Taliban really pushing in as fast as they wanted to go into the center of the city.
I do want to point out for the record that, to my knowledge and memory, this committee never had a hearing on the decision to withdraw from Afghanistan in February of 2020. And it now appears that would have been a beneficial hearing because we could have discussed all of these issues, but we were already on the path for withdrawal. And the withdrawal date under that agreement was May 1st of 2021. President Biden extended that. I don't know whether it was a negotiation or some kind of understanding until the end of August. General Milley, in questioning from Senator Cotton, you talked about your military advice about leaving on August 31st versus staying to try to help additional Americans leave. Was it the unanimous recommendation of the Joint Chiefs that the August 31st date should be observed? And if so, why was that the military advice?
It was of the Joint Chiefs, plus General McKenzie, General Miller, and General not Miller, but Admiral Vaisley and General Donahue. The reason is risk to force, risk to mission, and risk to the American citizens. On the 1st of September, we were going to go to war again with the Taliban. Of that, there was no doubt. And we were already in conflict with ISIS. So at that point in time, if we stayed past the 31st, which militarily is feasible, but it would have required an additional commitment of significant amounts of forces, probably 18th Airborne Corps, 15, 20, maybe 25,000 troops. We would have had to re-seize Bagram. We would have had to clear Kabul, the 6,000 Taliban that were already in Kabul. That's what would have happened beginning on the 1st. And that would have resulted in significant casualties on the U.S. side, and it would have placed American citizens that are still there at greater risk, in my professional view and in the view of all the other generals. So on the 25th, we recommended that we transition to a diplomatic option beginning on the 31st.
Thank you, General.
Thank you, Senator
Mr. Chairman.
King. Senator Tillis, please.